Water. It makes up most of our bodies. It makes up most of the planet. But it's what we put into the water that we drink that's making for a national debate.
So as we sit here today, it is not legal for cities and counties in Florida to add fluoride to the water.
It is illegal.
Fluoride has been added to American water systems for decades. Now there's a growing move to remove it. We examine the science and the controversy that may come down to a simple fact.
You have a right to know what's in your water.
Safety and justice will go hand in hand as we...
New York City's newest mayor has a new take on fighting crime, and that's a concern for many in the nation's largest city.
We do not know if we can trust him.
This week, his policies and prospects in the Big Apple.
Over $1 trillion. The amount of student debt in America is larger than the economies of some nations. $1.7 trillion. That is a staggering amount that is owed to the federal government, or in reality to all Americans. Is that ever going to get repaid?
Well, it's possible that a portion of that will not be repaid.
We take a look at the debt and some major changes that could affect millions of borrowers and all taxpayers.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Odds are you grew up not giving too much thought to fluoride in drinking water to prevent cavities. For 80 years, most American cities have been adding the chemical for healthy teeth. For just as long, dentists have been giving children fluoride drops and tablets. Now the FDA has just restricted the use of ingestible fluoride, saying it may be linked to gut and brain issues. And there's a growing movement to remove fluoride from public drinking water. Adding to the fire, a judge's order for the EPA to address added fluoride as a toxic substance for the first time and mitigate what the court says is an unreasonable risk to children's IQ.
We're at the Water Department in Melbourne, Florida, with Mayor Paul Alfrey, who says he first got worried about fluoride when he read the chemical's warning sheet.
From my experience serving in the U.S. Coast Guard, I was very familiar and trained on a material safety data sheet. And when you looked at what it said, it said, they call fluoride, which is hydroxysillic acid, would say arsenic, it would say lead, and different things that really are not good for the body.
In January, Melbourne became among the first in Florida to stop fluoridating its water supply.
You have a right to know what's in your water and what's necessary to be in your water. So that really should be your choice.
It's classified as a drug. When it's not put in your drinking water, it's required to be disclosed on products.
Right. And then you had some people say, well, if you're adding that, why don't you add other medications and add, vitamins? And really, that's not our process is to try to develop the cleanest water and really just put the basics in water.
Water fluoridation dates back to the 1940s. The chemicals are potent toxins from industry waste like aluminum and phosphate fertilizer plants. Factories once released the waste into the air and water. When health concerns put that to a halt, the industry began selling the toxic waste as fluoride components to add to public water to fight cavities, effectively flipping a costly hazard into a $1.2 billion a year business.
It's a hazardous material, and it's getting rid of it. I mean, now they have to figure out where to put it. They have to pay. So really, it was, it was the ability to get rid of it and dump it in drinking water and get paid to do so.
Melbourne's action was followed by a statewide ban. In July, Florida became the second state after Utah to halt fluoridation.
So as we sit here today, it is not legal for cities and counties in Florida to add fluoride to the water.
It is illegal. That's correct. It is illegal for cities and counties to add fluoride to water currently.
Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo says only after a deep dive into the research did he come to support banning fluoride.
I mean, it is a poison, and folks don't know that. Most folks don't know that.
On the other side, staunch fluoride advocates, including dental associations. The American and Florida dental associations wouldn't agree to an interview. The Florida Dental Association referred us to pediatric dentist Dr. Johnny Johnson, who told us he's only speaking for himself and not any dental groups nor the American Fluoridation Society.
There is no scientific evidence that water fluoridation should be stopped.
Johnson argues that many fluoride studies show no connection to lower IQ, bone fractures, or other health risks, and the ones that do used flawed methodologies. He's particularly critical of a 2019 Canadian study that suggested a link between fluoride exposure in pregnant women and lower IQ in boys.
The worst thing is they've never allowed their data to be evaluated by independent researchers, and a group in this country worked for 2 years trying to get that data, and eventually the university that houses it said, no, you're not getting it.
Johnson warns of dire consequences if the anti-fluoride movement expands.
Dental cavities are the most common chronic disease of adults and children in the U.S. and around the world. It is an infectious disease, and one of the most common ways to stop it is through water fluoridation. We know that abscessed teeth lead to brain infections, septicemia, lung infections and collapse, heart attacks, strokes, and people dying. That is a very serious disease, and fluoridation helps to reduce that greatly.
These concerns, they're completely bunk. It's totally bogus. Like, nothing like that is going to happen. The fluoride in water is not the thing that's going to make the difference between good dental health in Florida and bad dental health in Florida.
The other side will point to a lot of studies and say there are weaknesses in them, and that there are many studies on the other side saying that there is no risk that comes with fluoride.
But the fact is, yes, there are some studies that don't show a relationship, and that's true. However, still, when looking at them, what is striking is that the vast majority line up on this side of fluoride potentially being harmful. And the additional piece of information is that not only do you have congruence across many, many studies in different countries, but there's also a presence of a dose-response relationship. It is poor judgment to ignore that. People can do it, like the American Dental Association, they can do that, but it is poor judgment.
One of the big arguments that some of the dental experts make has to do with what will happen if cavities aren't prevented with fluoride in the drinking water. Yeah. More children, they say, will be hospitalized and need dental treatments in an emergency room and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's one of the strategies they use. So what they won't tell you is that, even before any of these efforts in Florida, something like a third, maybe a quarter of Floridians lived in areas without fluoridated water, and their teeth are not falling out over there. So this whole idea that the floor is just going to come out from underneath this in terms of dental health is not supported by any data. There's no data to support that.
On point, Hawaii, with the least fluoridated population in the U.S. last year, also have the best dental health. Still, fluoride advocates claim there are many examples of measurably poor health in places with less fluoridation. Meantime, a court ruling in California last year is forcing the issue at the federal level. A judge ordered the EPA to regulate added fluoride for the first time as a toxic substance, saying it poses an unreasonable risk to children's IQ. The industry-friendly EPA under Biden and now Trump is appealing, apparently on a different page than the Trump administration's FDA and CDC. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty McCary.
So fluoride is a classic example of how medical groupthink gets a very myopic view. The field saw this potential reduction in cavities and started saying, let's put this in drinking water. Well, it turns out, for the same reason it may kill some bacteria on the teeth, it's also killing bacteria in the microbiome in the gut. And so the billion different bacteria that live in the gut normally, that are critical for digestion and mental health and produce serotonin and vitamins, that microbiome is altered by fluoride. And so one of the actions I took at the FDA was to remove concentrated fluoride tablets for babies. And that's why we are saying, let's look at the data on fluoride. It's associated with lower IQs. It accumulates in a certain part of the brain. It may not reduce cavities, as the Cochrane review suggests, and it's altering the gut health of a generation of children. So we need to stop and be honest with people and let them know when we don't know something.
Overall this year, 17 states introduced bills to ban fluoridation. 2 passed, 10 failed, and 5 are pending. Locally in the past year, at least 62 communities stopped adding fluoride to water.
Practical advice for people who are concerned because of the things that you say. What can they do if fluoride's not being added to their water?
There's no substitute for water fluoridation. You cannot do anything that delivers the right amount of fluoride to an entire community without a single change in someone's behavior. You don't have to think about doing anything.
At one point, more doctors chose Camel cigarettes, and baby powder was good. So we're learning more and more. Matter of fact, doctors are investing more and more, and they're seeing that some of the stuff that we used to do wasn't so healthy.
The EPA's appeal of the fluoride court ruling is still pending. If the agency is forced to regulate added fluoride, it could set stricter limits, require warnings or monitoring, or ban it altogether. Coming up next on Full Measure, we look at the future of crime in New York City with a socialist mayor taking charge. From subway slashings to surging anti-Semitic attacks, crime is a center point of debate in New York City. Concerns about the future of law and order in the Big Apple are heightened with the election of incoming socialist mayor Zohran Mamdani. This past week, he stoked worries with his new chief of staff appointment, a woman regarded as the architect behind his campaign proposal to radically overhaul the NYPD. Mackenzie Frost reports on hopes Mamdani can deliver safer streets versus worries he intends to erode the thin blue line.
More than 8 million people call New York City home, and it plays a larger-than-life role. Wall Street is the center of the financial universe, and Times Square is the crossroads of the world. Now, all eyes are on newly elected Mayor Zohran Mamdani, a Democrat socialist who soared to victory on November 4th with more than 1 million votes in the largest turnout since 1969.
Safety and justice will go hand in hand as we work with police officers to reduce crime.
The 34-year-old campaigned on sweeping changes for New York City. A new direction brings support from New Yorkers and hesitancy.
I'm hopeful. You never know with these things.
On the campaign trail, Mamdani called to defund the police. He softened that with promises of a new direction for the NYPD. From current police responding to all calls to creating a new department staffed with social workers and mental health professionals to handle nonviolent calls instead of police. Keep the force at roughly what the mayor-elect's office claims is around $36,000, but cut overtime spending significantly. And decriminalize many misdemeanors like prostitution, reduce arrests and prosecution for nonviolent offenses. Fewer police resources is something Bronx hardware store owner Robert Morales is worried about, especially given the current criminal activity.
This is the Wild Wild West.
This store has been in Morales' family for 40 years. Shoplifting has been such a major problem for him since COVID, he crafted this makeshift loss prevention system. But if someone does slip through and slip out with stolen merchandise, Morales says he's concerned Mayor-elect Mamdani's policing plan will cut into his bottom line.
All right, thanks a lot, boss.
Are you hopeful that things will change when it comes to shoplifting and police response?
I don't think it's going to happen. He wants to turn this into a little misdemeanor, so he's just going to give him a little slap on the wrist.
NYPD spent $955 million on overtime in budget year 2024. Cutting that could mean less officers on the street and available to prevent crimes that have impacted innocent bystanders on the street and below. Mamdani's history of calling the NYPD racist and backing the defund the police movement raises red flags for Jim Quinn, former executive assistant district attorney in Queens, New York.
He has apologized for some of his comments and, made a public apology to NYPD overall. Do you believe and trust his apology?
Look, I'm willing to give anybody a chance, but these statements were not made, when he was 16 years old. He was 28 years old. He was running for the New York State Assembly, and he seemed very comfortable saying them. He's basically saying, I'm sorry I said it. I mean, he's sorry, I think, that it came out.
With the lowest number of NYPD officers in 25 years, Quinn says the staffing problems will get worse.
The ranks of the New York City Police Department are going to decrease because police officers are not going to stay under this mayor if he does what he says he's going to do.
Leaving less police to step in to protect against rising anti-Semitic attacks. In 2017, there were 116 Jewish hate crime complaints in New York City. That number jumped to 344 in 2024.
One of the things that I would think that a good mayor should do is increase security for the synagogue, increase security for Jewish areas, not decrease them.
David El-Ghazi has been the rabbi of Havarat Israel Synagogue in Queens for 45 years. Previous comments about the police aren't the only concerns he has with Mamdani.
Do you think that the language that he uses could harm the Jewish community?
Of course. Political leaders, like all leaders, whatever they say has a great influence.
Do you have extra security precautions in place now?
We are planning, yes.
What do you need to hear from him to make you feel more reassured?
I would be willing to forget what he said, but he needs to act and he needs to speak in a very different tone, and should be done fairly quickly.
The conventional wisdom would tell you that I am far from the perfect candidate. I am young, despite my best efforts to grow older. I am Muslim. I am a democratic socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
New York City's mayor-elect is dynamic and defiant, but it's his direction that New Yorkers are anxiously awaiting to unfold. For Full Measure, I'm Mackenzie Frost in New York City.
And ahead on Full Measure, even if you never borrowed a dime for college, you're on the hook for student debt. New rules could change that. Average college tuition has skyrocketed 180% in the past 20 years, far outpacing inflation. Now every working American, even those who never took a student loan, is subsidizing borrowers and their $1.7 trillion debt. The tab works out to up to $5,000 per taxpayer over the next decade. New rules to address the crisis are set to kick in next July. Scott Thuman reports.
Last 4th of July, amid patriotic symbols and celebration, President Trump signed his One Big Beautiful Bill. While tax cuts and health care dominated the headlines, there were also big changes for anyone with a student loan, impacting all Americans' wallets, because federal student loans are funded by taxpayer dollars. Federal student loan debt in America stands at just under $1.7 trillion. 42.5 million Americans have loans owing, on average, $39,000 each. Preston Cooper is a PhD economist with the American Enterprise Institute, a DC-based public policy organization. $1.7 trillion, that is a staggering amount that is owed to the federal government, or in reality to all Americans. Is that ever going to get repaid?
Well, it's possible that a portion of that will not be repaid, but the good news is that in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, there is a new repayment plan available to students that will enable them to pay off their debts faster.
For new students, the new plans kick in July next year. There will be fewer options, and those on income-based repayment plans will see the biggest changes. What about President Biden's plan of forgiveness? I know that got mired in the courts. Where does that stand now?
So President Biden's loan forgiveness plan has been struck down by the courts multiple times now. I would not be counting on loan forgiveness. I think that's just not going to happen in the near future, especially under the current administration.
All the changes that are coming, what will that mean for taxpayers?
So taxpayers are expected to save around $300 billion over the coming 10 years due to the changes to student loans. Most of that is from repealing President Biden's plan that had the $0 monthly payments, the SAVE plan.
So between the repayment pauses of the pandemic and President Biden's administration, it's been years since a lot of borrowers have made their payments.
That's right. So it has been 5 years since many borrowers have made a payment on their loans because of the payment pause. Some borrowers have never made a payment at all, and we're seeing in the data that lots of borrowers are actually not making payments on their loans right now, that the repayment rate is below 50%.
They're defaulting.
So if borrowers don't pay for an extended period of time, they'll enter default on their loans. And that means that the government is then empowered to garnish your wages. They are empowered to seize your tax refund, your Social Security benefit. It's going to be a massive hit to your credit score. That is not a situation that you want to end up in.
What other changes are on the way?
There are going to be new limits on how much students can borrow going forward. Because right now, colleges have taken advantage of these unlimited student loans basically to increase tuition and pass the cost on to students and eventually on to taxpayers.
But is that an incentive for universities to consider lowering tuition?
So if students cannot borrow for the full cost of attendance anymore, there's no longer that blank check for universities to charge whatever they want and then pass the cost on to students and taxpayers. Schools are going to have to make some tough decisions about how to limit tuition to make sure that students can borrow within the new limits that Congress has set out.
You study this, you understand it perhaps better than most would. If somebody asks you, what do you think of the process these days?
I would say the process is broken. You know, student loans can be a valuable tool to help students afford their education if they are used responsibly on the part of the student and the part of the college. But too often we've seen student loans go out the door to students who have very little hope of paying them back. So there are too many aspects of the system which simply are broken right now. But I am optimistic that we have started to take some steps towards fixing that.
As for who's making money by the overinflated college tuition and loans, private companies that act as loan servicers earn billions in taxpayer-funded fees, and colleges rake in the inflated tuition revenue fueled by the easy federal lending. After a break, what's ahead next week on Full Measure? Be sure and join me next week on Full Measure for a half-hour special looking at the future of human longevity. Is immortality within reach? Next week on Full Measure. Until then, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching.